They say the Carpathians have a voice, not the kind that speaks in words, but something older, an ancient murmur that rides on the wind, weaves through the pines and lingers just long enough to make you wonder if you ever heard it at all. 2. The east beyond where the paved roads surrender to gravel and gravel to mud, lies a place that no modern map dares mark. Vladini, a village cradled in fog, guarded by thickets of dead trees and cloaked in the kind of silence that gnaws at the edges of sanity. Travelers do not come here by accident. Roads bend strangely near the forest line. GPS signals stutter and compasses spin. It is as if the land itself conspires to keep the village hidden, and for good reason. Once, long ago, people spoke the name Vladini aloud. Now it exists only in the footnotes of half-burnt texts, in the margins of old monk manuscripts, and in the tales told by drunk old men who swear they saw things in their youth, things that watched them from behind trees, never blinking, never breathing. The story begins not with a scream or a chase, but with a stillness. It was mid-October when the wind first changed. Locals in neighboring towns, those few who still dared to live near the perimeter, noticed that animals were growing skittish. Dogs barked at nothing. Horses refused to ride north. Crows flew in low circles and vanished all at once. But in Vladini, where time was slower and people older, the signs were not ignored. Wooden shutters were bolted at dusk. Garlic hung in heavy, rotting braids from doorframes. Crosses etched into stone were scrubbed clean and recarved deeper. And always, the whisper of Varcolac passed between trembling lips. Most had forgotten the shape of the word, but the fear that had never left. The narrator does not follow a hero, not this time. There are no knights, no hunters, no silver bullets polished in secret drawers. There is only the land, the curse, and the final witness, a nameless traveler, curious and cursed, who arrived in search of stories and found something older than myth, something that waited to be remembered. It was late evening when he arrived. The sun hung low like a bleeding wound in the sky, casting long, reaching shadows across the trees. His boots sank into wet leaves, muffling each step. The air smelled of moss, rot, and old things best left buried. Ahead, the forest opened to reveal the village, a scattering of homes sagging under the weight of age, roofs blanketed in moss and windows dark as closed eyes. No smoke rose from chimneys, no laughter echoed between the homes, only the steady creak of a lone wooden sign that read, Vladini, swaying back and forth in the wind. Even though there was no wind at all, the traveler stopped. Something moved behind the trees, too tall for a man, too smooth for a bear, but when he turned, there was only stillness, always stillness. Vladini was not abandoned, but it might as well have been. The traveler stepped past the threshold marked by that ancient creaking sign and felt the air grow heavier. Not colder, not darker, just thicker, as if walking through water or grief. His presence stirred nothing. No dogs barked, no doors cracked open to peek. The houses simply watched him, blind and breathless. He wandered the main path, its stones uneven and slick with moss, winding between crooked buildings with bowed walls and shutters nailed shut. Some roofs had caved in entirely, revealing the hollow ribs of the homes beneath. But there were signs of life, faint ones. On a windowsill, a child's doll sat half drowned in rainwater. At the chapel's edge, fresh wax pooled beneath a candle that hadn't burned long ago. Someone had been here. Someone was still here, but they were hiding. The traveler didn't call out. Perhaps instinct kept his voice buried. The silence in Vladini didn't want to be disturbed, and he was beginning to understand why. As he approached the heart of the village, he saw the well, the kind built long before concrete, when stone, was laid by hand and sealed with animal blood. Vines now crawled up its sides. Something had been scratched into the stones, runes, crosses, symbols not found in any church doctrine. They weren't for worship, they were for warning. Around the earth was dead. Grass did not grow there, no insects danced above it. Just the faint scent of copper in the wind, like blood turned old. The traveler leaned close, peering into the mouth of the well. He could not see the bottom. No echo returned his breath. Just a long, patient darkness that looked back at him and blinked. He stepped away quickly, heart thudding in his chest. To the west of the square, an ancient chapel hunched like a dying man. Its steeple had collapsed long ago, and its stone steps were cracked and overgrown. He pushed open the door, surprised to find it unbarred, and stepped into dust, decay, and something else, something wrong. Inside, the pews were scattered, as if people had fled in haste. The altar had been defaced, its crucifix split down the middle. and behind it, scratched into the wall, a single word appeared over and over again: Varcolac. Not carved by knife, not burned, scratched by claw. The traveler turned to leave, but paused. On the floor lay a book, its cover leather-bound and swollen with dampness. He knelt and opened it. Not a Bible, but a journal, dated over 50 years ago. Pages filled with sketches, of wolves, of moons, of twisted, mangled bodies. No names. Only one recurring phrase: it lives beneath us. The well is not a well. It is a throat, and it is hungry. The wind howled through the broken rafters then, and the candle near the altar flickered to life. But there was no one there to light it. Something had noticed him, and something had woken up. He left the chapel with the journal pressed tight beneath his coat, heart hammering with the uncomfortable certainty that he was no longer alone. The wind had changed. It no longer whistled. It hummed, low and rhythmic, like breath through hollow bone. The sky was fading now, stained purple and gray, as dusk bled slowly into the valley. Shadows gathered not just from the angle of the sun, but from the forest itself, as if the trees had exhaled something darker into the world. He walked, not aimlessly. His feet were drawn toward the tree line at the village's edge, where the path curved into a tunnel of pines so densely packed they swallowed the light. The locals, had they still spoken, would have warned him of that path. The old forest was the spine of the curse, and it did not welcome strangers. Beneath the canopy, the air was colder, heavy with moisture and memory. Moss clung to tree trunks like flayed skin. Fungi bloomed in grotesque shapes along the roots, some pulsing faintly like something half alive. The journal had mentioned this place, described a clearing deep within the trees, where rituals had once been held, sacrifices offered, not in worship but in fear. No coordinates were listed, no trail marked, just one line, circled in thick black ink. Where the trees bow inward and no birds sing, it waits. He found that place far sooner than he expected. The forest opened without warning like a throat-swallowing light. Trees leaned inward, unnaturally bent, their branches gnarled and tangled like grasping fingers. The clearing was small, circular and wrong, the ground too level, the soil too dry. And in the center, surrounded by a crude ring of stones, was something that didn't belong, a carcass. No, what remained of one. The body of a stag, its antlers broken, its throat torn. But it wasn't fresh. The wound was black, charred at the edges, as though it had not been bitten but burned from the inside out. And yet no smell of rot, no insects, no decay. It looked preserved, a ritual death. Beneath the stag, partially buried in the dirt, was a symbol carved in stone, too large for one man to lift. It depicted a wolf's head, its jaw open, swallowing the moon. The traveler didn't speak, but something in him screamed. Every instinct urged him to run, but he stood there silent and frozen as the trees began to creak, not with wind but with movement. Around the clearing, the forest shifted. Trees didn't sway, they shivered. Something moved between them, fast, low to the ground, circling. Not footsteps, not paws. Something softer, quieter, longer. He turned but saw nothing. Only shadows that lingered too long. Only branches that bent toward him like supplicants. Then came the sound. A growl, not deep, not guttural, but distant, like thunder heard through a tunnel. And layered beneath it, something worse, the sound of breathing. Heavy, wet, and human. He backed away, eyes wide, every hair on his body prickling with ancestral fear. And then he saw them, two eyes wide and yellow, low in the dark, watching from the tree line. They did not blink. The traveler turned and ran. He did not look back. He did not stop running until the clearing was a memory and the forest closed behind him like a tomb sealing shut. His breath came ragged, tearing at his chest like claws. Branches whipped past his face. Roots grasped at his ankles, but the trees, for all their menace, no longer seemed the greatest danger. Not after what he'd seen watching him from the dark. The traveler broke from the tree line just as the last light drained from the sky. Night in Vladini was not like night elsewhere. It didn't fall. It rose, climbing from the earth itself, thick and impenetrable, until even the stars were choked from view. The village greeted him with silence, but it was no longer still. He could feel it now. Something pulsing beneath the ground. The houses seemed to lean closer, their broken windows yawning wider, as if bracing for something long overdue. He passed the well again. The stones glistened wet now, though no rain had fallen. The scent of iron was stronger. The chapel door hung open, swaying gently on its hinges, though there was no wind. Inside, the candle still burned, but now dozens more surrounded it, freshly lit, their flames steady and tall. Someone, or something, had prepared a vigil. On the altar, the journal lay open to a page he hadn't seen before. A final entry, scrawled in shaky handwriting that pressed deep into the parchment. The Vârcolac is not a beast, it is a memory that eats. It is not the cursed, it is the curse itself. We are its skin, its hosts, its mouths. To bleed is to call it, to remember is to feed it. I should not have written this. Beneath the words, a smear of blood, dried, human. The traveler stepped back from the altar as the floor groaned beneath his boots. The sound wasn't age, it was breath, rising from below. The chapel trembled slightly, just enough to knock dust from the rafters. Then the bells began to ring, not from the chapel, its steeple had collapsed, but from somewhere deeper in the village. A slow, deliberate toll, as though marking time for a procession that no longer marched. The ground pulsed again, and then the screaming started. Not words, not human, just a single, soul-shredding howl that split the night in two. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from beneath, above, within, kind of sound that didn't echo but spread, worming into the marrow. The traveler ran once more, guided only by instinct and terror. He no longer thought of escape, only survival. But even that felt like blasphemy in this place, at the edge of the village. He came upon something new, a graveyard he hadn't seen before, small, overgrown, swallowed by vines. Every headstone was broken, defaced or clawed. At its center stood a stone monolith, taller than a man, etched with a symbol he recognized, the wolf's jaw, moon in its throat. But something had changed. The stone was cracked, leading a thick black ichor that hissed where it touched the soil. He approached, drawn as if by magnetism, unable to look away. And then he saw them, figures, dozens, maybe more, rising from the ground, from the shadows, from the hollows between trees, not alive, not dead, twisted remnants of human shape, elongated limbs, hollow chests, jaws stretched too wide, eyes burning yellow in sockets too deep. They did not move toward him. They only watched. And then they knelt, every single one in unison, not to him, but to something behind him. He turned. He should not have turned. It stood beneath the trees where the shadows were thickest and the earth seemed unwilling to support its weight. The Varcolac, not a beast as the old tales whispered, not fur and fang. What stood before him was worse, something that remembered being human. Its shape was not fixed. It rippled, bones stretching, organs folding inward, a mimicry of man and wolf and something older, smoother, more insect than mammal. Its flesh shimmered like wet leather. Its mouth, there were too many teeth, too many jaws nested inside one another, like a lantern folded inward. And its eyes, they were not eyes, they were mirrors. The traveler looked into them and saw himself, but not just himself. He saw all who had come before, the priests who'd buried the dead without rites, the villagers who'd offered blood to the stones, the child who'd been taken in the fog. He saw each soul consumed, remembered only through pain, because the Varcolac was not a hunter. It was a memory made flesh. It fed not on bodies, but on legacy, on belief, on fear. It existed only because people had believed it did, and now, through curiosity and arrogance, he had added his own piece to its myth, and that was enough. The creature stepped forward, not fast, not aggressive. It did not need to chase. It had already won, because the traveler now knew. The moment he crossed into Vladeni, he had ceased being a man. He had become a witness. And the Varcolac did not kill its witnesses, it hollowed them. The figures around him, the kneeling ones, began to sway, mouths open in silent reverence. Their eyes were glass, empty, glowing faintly, as if a candle burned behind the skull. They were not possessed. They were preserved, shells that had seen too much and remembered too deeply. The traveler fell to his knees. He felt the weight of centuries pressing into his bones. His heartbeat slowed, his breath thickened. Words filled. His mind, not spoken but engraved like scars into thought. You came to know the curse. Now you are part of it. The Varcolac opened its maw, not to bite, to speak, and though no sound came, the meaning was clear. You will carry me. The forest shuddered, the ground cracked, roots erupted upward, wrapping around the traveler's limbs. They did not tear. They merged, sliding beneath skin, weaving through muscle, filling his body like rivers flooding stone. And in that moment, he understood. Vladeni had no survivors, only successors. They say the mountains remember, And sometimes late at night when the fog rolls thick across the valleys of Transylvania, a traveler may arrive at a village that does not exist on any map. And when he returns, if he returns, he carries with him stories that spread, stories that feed, and the curse lives on. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling legends and terrifying tales, make sure to like this video. It really helps us out. You can also click on our Ultimate Werewolf playlist to watch more horror and cryptid stories. The link is in the description below. And if you love horror, folklore, and unexplained mysteries, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of fear seekers. But don't stop there. Turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Because in the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.